Welcome back. Sure, let's discuss Edmonton. I've seen the requests in the comment section. Let us discuss Edmonton. Having some struggles coming out of the Four Nations break. There's been discussion about whether or not, for some of the players who were in Four Nations, including Connor McDavid, whose jersey I'm wearing here, that maybe that emotional roller coaster of Four Nations and just that overall exhaustion coming out of that tournament has caused his play to drop. And that's something we discussed before the return from Four Nations. That for some players, for some teams, maybe it might be difficult to get back into the regular season grind after such an intense tournament. And I think that's been part of it. But there's other things. One of the games I watched, I'm trying to think which one it was. I think it was against Tampa. And they're scrolling the lines at the top. Here's who's playing with who. And of course, you got McDavid on the first line, Draisaitl on the second line, Nugent Hopkins on the third line, which I, for years, have advocated. That's the best way for the Oilers to go. That 1 through 3 down the middle, it is very difficult to find another team that can match that 1 through 3 down the middle. And one of the key things to winning a Stanley Cup is depth down the middle and being able to flex that strength down the middle at the right time in the playoffs. And it makes it more difficult for other teams to play against you. The problem is they don't have the wingers. So this is why they very often will then put Draisaitl on a line with McDavid. Sometimes they move Nugent Hopkins over to the wing so he can play on one of the top two lines. And that's an issue because it exposes they do not have the depth on the wing. And we have talked about this year after year after year after year after year, it seems, that depth has been a problem for the Oilers. As much as we talk about it for Toronto, it's been a problem for the Oilers as well. And yet they went all the way to the final. And I even had to check this before starting this video. They are still the odds-on favorite to win the Stanley Cup. People are gambling their money in large numbers that the Oilers are going to win the Stanley Cup this year. So coming out of the break, it started with a loss against Philadelphia, 6-3. And I was willing to write that one off and say, you know what? The Oilers, it's the first game coming out of a break. It's in Philly. Maybe they're not focused. It happens. You know, it's like you're returning from over 2 weeks off. Maybe you're a bit rusty. Now, in that game, they trailed first. They did lead 2-1 after the first period. And Stuart Skinner saved 26 out of 31. We'll talk about the goaltending with the Oilers as well, of course. Then they go to Washington. Well, Washington's been a murderer's row in terms of you're good luck getting through Washington if you're in Washington, and they lost 7-3. Interestingly enough, they scored first. They did trail 2-1 after the second period, and Pickard got lit up. 28 saves on 34 shots. But Washington's lit up goalies most of the year. Now, of course, Washington's gone into a bit of a slump, too, coming out of the break. But at that point, I mean, Washington, arguably the best team in the league that's not named Winnipeg, or maybe they are better than Winnipeg. I don't know. We'll see what happens come playoff time and which team does better in those playoffs. But then the Oilers go to Tampa. These are not easy locations. After the game against Philly, these are not easy games. They lose 4-1 against Tampa. They scored first. It was tied 1-1 after one. And then, of course, they end up losing 4-1. Skinner saves 32 out of 36. Then they go to Florida. And the Florida Panthers, rematch of the Stanley Cup final. They lose that game 4-3. They trailed first. It was tied 1-1 after one. And again, Skinner saves 32 out of 36. One thing to look at is they've been struggling to get the right numbers with their goaltenders. Now, I don't have the numbers for last night's game when it comes to goaltenders. I was having a hard time getting everything to fit in here, but we know the goaltenders last night didn't have great numbers. So the one game where they had really good numbers from the goaltender was against Carolina. Pickard steals it. So they win that one 3-1 in Carolina. They scored first. They led 1-0 after the first. They led 2-0 after the second, and they won it 3-1. Pickard saves 35 out of 36. Last night he saved 7 out of 11 in that first period against Anaheim. Gets replaced by Skinner. Skinner saved, I think it was 14 out of 16 the rest of the way, but they lost 6-2. I'm looking at the boards I can see that haven't been cleared up yet, but the Edmonton game is not visible to me. Anyways, so they lose that one 6-2 last night. They scored first, which is interesting because in 4 of the 6 games they've scored first, they've won 1 of those 4 games. So that's a problem right there. They trailed 4-1, of course, after the first last night. They end up losing that one 6-2, and that's against Anaheim. Now, here's the thing. So they lose against Philadelphia. You could write that off, as I said, as being rusty coming off 2 weeks off, right? Philadelphia was just more ready than they were. Washington, top team in the East. Tampa, also right now a top team in the East. Florida, top team in the East. Carolina, a team they beat, considered to be one of the stronger teams in the East. And then the first game home after a 5-game road trip, very often in the NHL's history, I don't have the numbers on this, but I know this is a thing, that teams after a long road trip can have a problem that first game at home. Absolutely happens. Where a team will come home after a long road trip and they lay a bit of a stinker in front of their home crowd after that long road trip. So it's been tough. It's been very tough for an Oilers team that going into the break looked excellent, and now they're 1-5 coming out of it. And this is something I talked about going into the break, that some of these teams look really good, and coming out of the break, some of them won't, and some of the teams that are struggling are going to look really good. Now, they have a chance to turn this around. Tomorrow night, they're at home against Montreal. Montreal's on a heater. Montreal's playing very, very well. If they take Montreal lightly, well, that'll basically extend the losing streak. It turns it into another losing streak because they got that win against Carolina in the middle. But it extends their struggles, put it that way. Montreal's playing really well. Edmonton should have no problem getting up for Montreal coming into town. And there'll be a lot of Montreal fans in the crowd, so that very often fires up the home team a little bit more to hear so much cheering for the other team in their building. Then they're at home against Dallas on Saturday. Now, I've talked about Dallas. Now they're getting better on the road. But that's a game Edmonton needs. They really do. If they want to stay close to Vegas, and not just that, LA's not far behind. And LA has games in hand. So what Edmonton's done with this losing skid that they've had is they've opened the door to the Kings potentially getting second place. Now, we talk a lot about how home ice advantage in the playoffs. Does it matter? For the Kings, it does. The Kings are a very different team on the road, where they haven't been very good, versus at home, where they've been the best team in the league. The Oilers need to hold that second spot, at the very least. Because otherwise, since LA is very familiar with Edmonton as well, you run into a situation where an LA team with a home advantage, plus looking for revenge after, I think it's 3 years in a row that Edmonton's knocked them out in the first round, it could be LA's turn. They could be due. So these games are really important upcoming. Then they go on the road again. But this road trip doesn't look as daunting. So it starts on Monday in Buffalo. So they go from a home game on Saturday to playing in Buffalo on Monday. Just the one game off in between. And then they're in New Jersey against the Devils on Thursday the 13th, followed by a game the next night against the Islanders. And playing against the Islanders right now, you really don't know what you're going to get from them from one night to the next. But the Battle of the Orange and Blue, where both of these teams were orange and blue, Islanders might be a little bit fired up. And then on Sunday, the Oilers are in New York against the Rangers. So 1 day off between for each of these games. Then they come back home. They have 1 day off before the next home game against Utah on Tuesday the 18th. Utah has played much, much, much better over the last few weeks. And what I mean is, going into the break and coming out of the break, they've been pretty good. So the Oilers can't take them lightly. And then they're at home on Thursday the 20th against Winnipeg. That should be an intense battle. And then on Saturday the 22nd, they're at home against Seattle. Seattle showing a little bit of fight. They almost came back last night against Minnesota. They didn't, but they almost did. And so if you take Seattle lightly, right, it's a trap game. So the upcoming schedule, how many of these teams are above the playoff line? 1, 2, 3, technically, 4, 5. 5 out of 9. And then of the ones that aren't above the playoff line, Montreal's close, Utah's close. They have something to play for. So 7 out of these 9 games are not gimmies. So you could argue that Seattle and Buffalo are teams that are out of contention. Those should be easy, but Buffalo's had their share of victories recently. I think they're 6-3-1 in their last 10, something along those lines, even with some of the ugly losses they've had. And Seattle, there's a little bit of fight there from them as well. Now, things are going to change coming out of the trade deadline, too. Maybe both Buffalo and Seattle are just in complete and total freefall. We do see that where teams sell off at the deadline and then, the team slumps even further. But that's really it in terms of the upcoming schedule if you're looking for teams that are easy. I guess I should include the Islanders there, too, right? Let me redo this. I think I included the Islanders as a team above the playoff line. Bad hockey guy. 1, 2, 3, 4... Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4. I had a full night's sleep too. I have nothing to blame for this. Nothing. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 above the playoff line out of 9. This is going to turn into the count pretty quickly. Keep up with me. Anyways, yeah, the Islanders are above the playoff line. But out of the next 9 games, I'm just saying it's not going to be easy. The Islanders are going to give you a fair fight. And this is a team that, they've allowed 6 goals against Philly and allowed 6 goals against Anaheim. So it's happened. Now, over this 6-game stretch, now that we're past that clumsy part of the video, let's get to the 6-game stretch and how everybody's been playing. Draisaitl, 6 games, 5 goals, 4 assists, 9 points. Noteworthy with plus-minus over a short period of time. I do like to use plus-minus when you're looking at a smaller sample size because I think it does tell you about just how much teams are struggling 5-on-5. So the fact that Draisaitl has 9 points in 6 games, he's a -3, tells you a lot of those points are going to be power play points. McDavid, 6 games, 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points, and he's been a -9. McDavid does not look like himself to the point where last night when he gets a goal and an assist, that was seen as a positive coming into the game. That McDavid finally looks like he's going to be McDavid because he had 4 assists in 5 games previous to last night. But when you lose 6-2, you're just trying to find some kind of positive out of it, and it might be more difficult to do so. Then you got Klingberg, 6 games, 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points. I think Klingberg's been a good pickup. Ekholm, 6 games, 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points, a -7 over that time. We know how good Ekholm can be, and his numbers just not pretty since the break. Bouchard, 6 games, 1 goal, 2 assists, 3 points, and a -8 rating for Evan Bouchard. Hyman, 6 games, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points, -4 for Zach Hyman. Hyman was relatively hot going into the break. Nugent Hopkins, 6 games, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points, and a -3. Brett Kulak, 6 games, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points, and a -5. Corey Perry, 1 goal in 6 games. Adam Henrique, 1 goal in 6 games. Jeff Skinner, 1 goal in 4 games because he gets healthy scratched here and there. And then you get into this whole idea that the wingers just aren't scoring. Arvidsson, 1 assist in 6 games and a -4 rating. Podkolzin, 1 assist in 6 games. I love Podkolzin's work ethic. I think he's a good player. But when I saw him penciled in as a winger for McDavid, I thought, that's interesting. Because I like Podkolzin, but he's not a top winger. And I thought it was an interesting choice right there. Savoy, 4 games, 1 assist and a -4. I think Savoy's look good at points, but yeah, I mean, 5-on-5, there are some concerns. There's a reason he was available for trade from Buffalo. And Darnell Nurse, no points in 4 games and a -5 rating over that period in time. So there's a lot of reason for concern here. And really, when you look at it, you got Draisaitl and McDavid. Then you got 3 defensemen in the scoring before anybody else shows up. So it tells you they're getting some production from their blue line. They're not getting production from their wings. And even Nugent Hopkins' numbers haven't been stellar since the break either. They're going to pick this up. They're going to turn it around. And one of the reasons why I wasn't doing a video on Edmonton just coming out of that road trip and before last night's game was I thought, well, they're going to get it going. But I thought after last night's game, I probably do need to talk about this. Now, cap space is tricky. Current cap space, according to Puckpedia, $4,588,894. However, Evander Kane's trending towards a return. Evander Kane wants to play. Evander Kane's cap hit is $5.13 million. There's a reason that Edmonton's been trying to move his contract, which has been the rumor anyways. And if they're not, that's probably where they should look to save some money. Evander Kane's $5.13 million puts them over the cap. Means they can't really add. And that's where it gets tricky with, because I've seen people say, hey, if John Gibson was available, maybe the Oilers would look at him. Great. That's a $6.4 million cap hit, and this is a team that already can't afford to activate Kane. Plus, the goaltenders that the Oilers do have, if you're going to send a goaltender back to Anaheim, their cap hit's nowhere near $6.4 million. In fact, both these goaltenders well below $6.4 million combined with cap hit. Now, Calvin Pickard has a 1-2 record since the break, .864 save percentage and a goals against average of 4.75. Stuart Skinner 0-3, .874 save percentage, 4.14 goals against average since the break. It does feel like it's an old discussion to have. The Oilers don't have a goaltender that you look at and go, there's the clear number one. Winnipeg has Hellebuck. Winnipeg has that. Vegas can look at Adin Hill and say, look, we won a Stanley Cup with this guy before. Colorado fixed their goaltending problem. They went out and got Mackenzie Blackwood. They went out and got Wedgwood as well for the backup. Dallas has Ottinger. Ottinger can be very up and down, but he's been a pretty strong goaltender. And so when you look at teams in the West, it is one thing you can point to and say they would have that advantage over the Oilers. Even though I understand Oiler fans are going to come in and say Skinner proved himself with games 4 through 7 in any series he played this past spring. Yes, but is he going to do that every year? Was there some fortune, some good fortune in that? Was there just he got a little more focused, and that focus hasn't necessarily been there during this regular season, and he'll be fine. The problem is, so Bouchard is a restricted free agent this summer. He's going to get a raise. I think his cap hit currently is $3.9 million. He's going to get more than that. And then next summer, 2026, McDavid is due. And McDavid's due a healthy raise. He's going to get it. This is a team that is going to struggle with the fact that Draisaitl's cap hit next year goes up to $14 million, and McDavid's cap hit's probably going to be $15 million plus the following year. Even with a cap hit or a salary cap that's going up, you're going to be in a situation where you're paying your top guys a lot of money. Makes it more difficult to get a really top-notch goaltender. I'm not necessarily saying Gibson's a top-notch goaltender at this point in his career either. But you're going to have to go the trade route unless you're going to draft a top-notch goaltender and develop that goaltender. And that takes time. And the Oilers don't have a ton of time. Because the problem is, let's just say that the Oilers continue to meander and they go out early in this year's playoffs. I mean, I think McDavid stays in Edmonton. But McDavid next summer could basically just, have a blank check and see who's willing to sign it and sign for whatever money he wants on a 7-year extension or 7-year contract somewhere else. Because, of course, as a UFA, you can only sign a 7-year contract. You can sign an 8-year contract with the team that owns your rights before July the 1st, but after July 1st, it's a 7-year contract. But he could basically just decide, I don't know if this team's going to win. I want a chance to do that. The Edmonton Oilers, over the next, how many months are we looking at here? About almost 18 months, right? About 16 months? 15 months. Over the next 15 months, the Oilers need to kind of show, hey, we're getting closer to that cup. And when you were in the Stanley Cup final last year, there's only way to show you're getting closer, and that's to win it. So the Oilers are going to be all in at the deadline. They're going to have to move Kane's money if he's going to come back. And there's been a lot of talk about him, trending towards a return. And there are some contracts here. Maybe they try to move Jeff Skinner. Maybe they try to move one of their defensemen to try to free up some cap space as well. I think the Oilers are still a team that could win it. I think this is a team that has every capability of doing it. But the weakness on the wings is noticeable. And the lack of a star goaltender, a real true star goaltender, is a thing. Last year, of course, Florida wins with Bobrovsky. Previous year, Vegas wins with Hill, who is not a superstar goaltender, but he did go on and win that Stanley Cup, and he's given them really strong goaltending since then. He is their number one guy. And we can discuss about Vegas letting go of Logan Thompson, sure, to keep Hill, but Hill has that Stanley Cup. Colorado, of course, in 2022, they won it with Darcy Kemper, who then exits the team. I guess if you're an Oilers fan, you could look at the Avs and say, well, Kemper was good, not necessarily game-stealing, so we have that with Skinner. And if you believe that, kudos to you, but there will be some that would argue that Skinner's numbers have always been around league average, very often a little bit below. And then the other debate that comes in when you do that, and I've learned that with this channel, is if there's any criticism of a goaltender, immediately fans will jump in with, it's not the goalie, it's the defense. Which means that you're trying to then make moves to change up the defense. It is going to be a very difficult challenge on Friday to figure out exactly how to remedy the issue with this team. And you only have one game between now and Friday, and that's at home against Montreal. And if they win that game, say 2-0 or 3-1, does it really change anything? No. If they lose that game 3-0 or 4-0, does it really change anything that they need at the deadline? No. So it will be interesting to see how that game turns out, just to see if the trend continues that this team is showing some weakness recently, and see if one of their goaltenders can have a really strong game. I would say that if Pickard plays really well, he could be the starter for game one. Absolutely could. I do think that Chris Knobloch will go with who is the best goaltender playing into the playoffs. And so this might be Pickard's chance. We'll see. The Oilers are an interesting squad, though. Let me know your thoughts on whether you think this losing skid is problematic, whether it's made you concerned. What do you think they need? For me, it's and stop me if you've heard this before. Depth scoring and some certainty when it comes to the blue line and the goal. Because if you don't have that number one goaltender, and you may be arguing Skinner's the guy, but if you don't have that, and if you don't have that defense that can protect that net, you're not going to go that far in the playoffs. And so there's those concerns for me. But also, I will close this out by saying this is a really tough road trip. Lots of teams have struggled with this road trip over the years. Going through Washington, Tampa, Florida, Carolina has ruined a lot of records over the years. So I do think there's probably some overreacting to the fact they've lost the games, although I can understand the concern with how some of these losses have looked, including the ones that bookend this streak here. The loss in Philly and then the loss at home last night against Anaheim. I think the most concerning thing would be when it was 4-1 Anaheim. Starting that second period, I thought, here comes the Oilers. This is going to get ugly. And it didn't happen. That fight back that you're looking for did not happen. And so that's something that I think should be more concerning than just the losses. The fact that the team just looked defeated after the first period against an Anaheim Ducks team. They came into the game 500, NHL 500. A team that, while I'm not saying that they're awful, that's a team that Edmonton should beat. And being behind by 3 goals after the first, they should come up with some attitude in that second period and kind of angry and play like the Oilers of seasons past, and they really didn't. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.